Samsung. Here's what happens when one company becomes too important to prosecute. In 2017, Samsung's chairman, Lee Jae-yong, was convicted of bribery and corruption. Real conviction, 5 years in prison, open and shut case. He served just 1 year. Then the president of South Korea personally pardoned him. The official reason? To help overcome the economic crisis. A democratic government bent its own justice system because losing one company's leadership would hurt too much. Let that sink in for a second. And here's what is actually mind-blowing. Samsung doesn't just make your phone and your TV. They build the tanks that defend South Korea from the north. They build the warships. They run hospitals, hotels, theme parks, shipyards, life insurance, all of it. The numbers are insane. Samsung is 13% of South Korea's entire GDP. When Samsung announces quarterly earnings, the Korean won's exchange rate literally moves with it. In 2024, Samsung alone was responsible for half of the country's economic growth. So here's the nightmare scenario. What if Samsung decided to pack up and move their headquarters to Singapore? South Korea would wake up and realize they'd built their entire modern economy and their national defense around a company that could just leave whenever it wanted. This isn't a country with a powerful company. This is a country hostage to one. Toyota. After World War II, Japan was broke. We're talking bombed factories, no money, no raw materials broke. They couldn't even dream of competing with America's giant assembly lines and warehouses stacked to the ceiling with inventory. So Toyota did something nobody had ever tried before. They invented an entirely new way of making things. No big inventories, no waste. Every worker, even the lowest one on the floor, could stop the entire production line the second they spotted a problem. Constant, tiny, daily improvements. Forever. They called it the Toyota Production System. And then, something nobody saw coming. The whole world copied it. Every factory you can think of, Apple, Boeing, Amazon's warehouses, runs on Toyota's playbook today. Just in time. Lean manufacturing. Continuous improvement. All of it, Toyota. The scale of what this became is hard to even process. Japan's auto industry employs 5.5 million people. That's 10% of every working person in Japan. Toyota's sales generate nearly 100 trillion yen of activity through the economy. One company, pulling an entire nation along behind it. Now imagine Toyota disappeared. Japan wouldn't just lose a company. They'd lose the thing that proved their entire approach to work even worked. The story Japan tells the world about itself. Disciplined, efficient, world-class. That story is Toyota. But here's the dark twist nobody likes to talk about. The same hyper-efficient culture that made Japan a superpower? It also gave them a word for what it does to people. Karoshi. Death from overwork. People literally working themselves into the grave. If Toyota fell tomorrow, Japan would be stuck with an impossible choice. Keep the work culture that's killing them, or admit the very thing that defined them was wrong all along. TSMC. In 1987, a man named Morris Chang had what sounded like the most boring business idea on Earth. American companies were great at designing computer chips, but they were terrible at making them. So Chang started a company that would just manufacture chips. For everyone else, no designs of their own, just the factory. He had no idea what he was actually building. Today, TSMC makes 90% of the most advanced chips on the planet. Not most of them, 90%. Every iPhone you've ever held, every AI model you've ever used, every Tesla, every PlayStation, every laptop, runs through one company on one island. TSMC alone is 8.9% of Taiwan's gross domestic product and half of the entire stock market. And here's the scenario that keeps world leaders up at night. If TSMC stopped tomorrow, war, earthquake, sabotage, anything, the global economy locks up within weeks. There's no plan B, no competitor can match their 3 nanometer technology. Phones and cars stop getting made, AI grinds to a halt. Trillions of dollars. Gone. So an entire nation is essentially being protected by a chip factory. People call it the Silicon Shield, but TSMC's own executives hate that name. One of them put it perfectly. Why would we want to stand on the front line of a war? But that's exactly what they are. And here's the cruelest part of the whole thing. The better they get at making chips, the bigger the target on Taiwan's back becomes. Their success is their danger. Their strength is what turns them into a prize. Nokia. In the 1990s, Nokia wasn't just a Finnish company. Nokia was Finland. They were the proof that a tiny Nordic country could lead the world in technology. At their peak in 2000, Nokia was 4% of Finland's GDP and 21% of every single thing Finland exported. And here's the part that genuinely hurts. Nokia had touchscreens before Apple. They had an app store before app stores existed. They had internet on phones years before anyone else. They had every single ingredient of the modern smartphone. But they couldn't see it. They thought a phone was a phone. Apple looked at the exact same hardware and saw a computer in your pocket. In 2007, the iPhone launched. Nokia's CEO went on stage and publicly called it too expensive and irrelevant. Within a few years, Nokia was over, and the damage to Finland was brutal. Nokia was 70% of the entire Finnish stock market, the country's trade surplus, gone. From 2008 to 2019, the average Finn's income actually declined for over a decade. But the worst part wasn't the money, it was the confidence. Finland had to admit, out loud to the entire world, that the company they'd built their national identity around had been completely, painfully wrong about the future. It took them years to recover. And today, Finland's startup scene is deliberately scattered across dozens of small companies. Never again. Never again will one company carry an entire country's reputation. Saudi Aramco. Saudi Arabia has a problem you would not want to be in charge of solving. Their entire civilization, every road, every school, every glass tower in Riyadh was built on selling something the world is now actively trying to stop buying. Oil. Here's the math. Oil pays for 87% of everything the Saudi government spends. Saudi Aramco, just one company, pulled in $436 billion in revenue in 2024. That's bigger than the GDP of most countries on Earth. But every year, more countries announce they're going carbon neutral. We see more electric vehicles on the road. Every year, oil demand inches closer to its peak, and then a permanent terminal decline. So what's Saudi Arabia's plan? Vision 2030. They're going to spend $500 billion building a post-oil economy using oil money. They are literally funding their own obsolescence with petroleum profits. The more successful Vision 2030 becomes, the faster the world stops needing the thing paying for it. And here's the trap. If Aramco vanished tomorrow, 40% of Saudi Arabia's GDP, gone, overnight. No money left to fund the renewable cities. No money for the desert megaprojects. No money for any of the transition that's supposed to save them. Saudi Aramco isn't just a company. It's a countdown timer. Every single barrel they pump brings them closer to the day nobody wants what they're selling. Singapore Airlines. In 1965, Singapore got kicked out of Malaysia. Their founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew went on national television and cried on camera because he genuinely believed his country was too small to survive on its own. And honestly, he had a point. No oil, no farmland, no metals, no military that could scare anyone. Surrounded on every side by countries that were way, way bigger than them. So Singapore made what might be the most audacious bet in modern economic history. They wouldn't make things. They wouldn't grow things. Instead, they'd become the place where global business happens. And the cornerstone of that bet? An airline. Singapore Airlines wasn't just transportation. It was the gravity that pulled the entire world toward this tiny dot on the map. World-class service. Best airport on the planet. connect everyone to everywhere through Singapore. And it worked. Singapore now pulls in $192 billion in foreign investment every year. 60% of it goes straight to financial services. Their trade to GDP ratio is 320%, one of the highest on Earth. 60 million passengers flow through the Changi airport every year. Each one, a potential customer for a Singaporean bank, a Singaporean law firm, a Singaporean wealth manager. But here's the dependency. Services are 70% of Singapore's GDP, and every single dollar of it depends on people being able to physically get there. If Singapore Airlines collapsed, it wouldn't just be a tourism problem, it would be a credibility problem. Because when you've sold yourself as the center of the global economy, you cannot have a second-rate airline catering your visitors. Apple. This might be one of the most surreal stories. Ireland, an entire nation, built their modern economy on helping massive companies avoid taxes. And their biggest client? Apple. Here's how it works. Apple funnels almost all of their global profits through Ireland. And the tax rate they pay there? An effective rate of 0.005%. Another way to put it, for every $1,000 in profit, Apple paid just 5 cents in tax. And Ireland? They love it. Apple alone is estimated to provide 25% of all the corporate tax money Ireland collects. Now here's the part nobody believes the first time they hear it. The European Union looked at this whole arrangement and basically said, yeah, no, this is illegal. They ordered Apple to pay Ireland 13 billion euros in back taxes. And Ireland fought it. In court, they spent millions of euros trying to reject 13 billion in free money. Why? Because if Ireland accepted that ruling, every multinational watching would start packing their bags. The whole game would be over. Dublin's entire financial district exists for one reason, helping companies do exactly what Apple does. No Apple loophole, no Dublin. But the clock is ticking. Global minimum tax rates are coming. And the moment companies have to pay similar tax everywhere on Earth, there's no reason left to route money through Dublin. Ireland built their entire prosperity on a loophole. And loopholes? They always have expiration dates. IKEA. This one is genuinely sneaky. In the best way, IKEA didn't just sell furniture. It sold an entire country's worldview, disguised as a bookshelf. Think about everything IKEA quietly tells you. Good design shouldn't be expensive. Beauty comes from simplicity. Stuff should last. Everything should be functional. Equality, sustainability, minimalism. Those aren't just product principles. Those are core Swedish social democratic values. Sweden literally exported its politics in flat-pack boxes, and the world bought it by the millions. The scale is honestly insane. 504 stores, 63 countries, 45 billion euros every single year, and in nearly every country IKEA enters, locals quietly start arranging their living rooms like the Swedes, without ever realizing it's happening. Here's the genius part. You would never voluntarily adopt another country's politics, but you will buy a 49 euro bookshelf. You will eat the meatballs. You will follow the assembly instructions. And by the time you've finished building that Billy shelf, you've quietly absorbed Swedish ideas about equality, sustainability, and less is more. Sweden doesn't need an army to do this. They don't need a media empire. They have furniture, and it's working. But here's the risk. Sweden has tied its entire international reputation to one company. If IKEA ever fell, a massive scandal, a quality collapse, a generational shift, it wouldn't just hurt IKEA. The world's confidence in the Swedish model itself would take the hit. Because Sweden's real soft power isn't sitting in their parliament. It's sitting in your living room, right now. It's genuinely fascinating when you step back and look at it. A single company can quietly become so woven into a country's economy, its identity, sometimes even its national defense, that you can't really separate the two anymore. The line between business and country just blurs. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories on how the world's biggest companies actually work. Which company surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching.